economic common ground and moral higher ground. America, our time has come. We've come from disgrace to amazing grace. Our time has come.
21 newsmakers, analysts, and reporters were out on the Sunday morning talk shows, but only one gets the last word, and that honor today goes to the man you just heard speaking to the Democratic National Convention 25 years ago, former presidential candidate and the founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend, it's great to see you this morning. Welcome to State of the Union.
Good morning.
I want to go back in time in a moment, but I want to fast forward for a second because we read something in your hometown newspaper, the Chicago Sun-Times, on Friday that I wanted to ask you about. We're 6 months into the Barack Obama presidency, a historic presidency, and Mary Mitchell wrote this in the Chicago Sun-Times. When Bill Clinton was in the White House, Jackson practically had keys. But who from the grassroots of black America is speaking regularly to Obama about the issues that specifically relate to black people? Jackson is on the outside looking in. The Reverend Jeremiah Wright has been banished. Minister Louis Farrakhan won't get an audience. The Reverend Al Sharpton is operating on the fringes. Reverend, is Barack Obama pushing out, excluding, keeping on the outside the previous generation of black African-American political leaders, including yourself?
No, he meets often with the Congressional Black Caucus. He meets with African-American mayors. I think that we want to engage more fully with him because there is a lot of unfinished business, and I think in time his disposition is to address the issues that we feel most acutely about more meaningfully.
What about you?
Well, at some point in time, we will meet. I was very impressed with his speech in New York just this past week, and there are two dimensions. He acknowledged that there is this issue of structural inequality, and you have to overcome it with superior motivation. But his mission now is not just superior motivation, which is a big deal, but to address structural inequality and make it equality, and that involves a targeted stimulus investment. In these deep, dark areas where plants have closed and jobs have left and the tax base has gone down, second-class schools, first-class jails, where jobs are leaving and drugs and guns are coming, that requires a real targeted stimulus urban project policy, which has not yet happened, but that is his challenge.
Well, let's discuss the challenge further, but as we do so, let's go back in time again to that speech back in 1984, because you laid out in that speech what you thought were the stakes, the benefits, the pluses of a Jesse Jackson candidacy for president. Let's listen.
If blacks vote in great numbers, progressive whites win. It's the only way progressive whites win. If blacks vote in great numbers, Hispanics win. When blacks, Hispanics, and progressive whites vote, women win. When women win, children win. When women and children win, workers win. We must all come up together. We must come up together.
They asked you 25 years later, sir, how are we doing?
Well, we've made an amazing progress. You saw it in Grant Park this past year with the election of President Barack Obama. You know, we must not forget, we got the right to vote in 1965. It was not for blacks only. In Selma, white women couldn't serve on juries in Alabama. Farmers who couldn't pay poll taxes couldn't vote. By 1970, by extension, 18-year-olds got the right to vote. By extension, in 74, we won a suit in Mississippi where you could vote residency. You can vote on the campus where you attend school. By 75, bilingual voting. In 84 and 88, we fought to reduce the threshold and move toward proportionality. So as we grew in the civil rights movement, it laid the predicate for tearing down walls, building bridges, and in fact, a new America.
You make the point about the progress there. I've moved over to the map because there is some progress, as you just noted, but there's also what I would call, and I think you would agree, is unfinished business. And I want to go back to look at, this is the African-American population in the United States. When you were running in 1984 the first time, 33.8% were below the poverty line. Now it's 24.5%. Some progress, but not enough. The unemployment rate among African-Americans, 1984 was 15.1%. Pretty much close to that now, 14.7%. In single-parent families, the percentage of African-Americans in single-parent households, 53% in 1984, 56% now. Reverend Jackson, what needs to be done to fix this gap? And specifically, is there anything this president should be doing that you don't see him doing?
Well, just as there's been a stimulus target for the banks to let them recover, and they've recovered to such an extent that they are now making a profit again and sending money back to Washington. There must be a targeted stimulus at the base where you have this vast unemployment where, as I say, when the plants close and jobs leave, the tax base erodes, which affects the schools. In urban America, you have these vast bodies of poverty. And so if you're going to move from welfare to work, you need what? Child care, you need job training, a job and transportation. That requires rather targeted work. And I would think that remains a part of the unfinished business to, in fact, put the most unemployed.
We're back now, our last word conversation with the civil rights leader, Jesse Jackson. Reverend, before the break, you were talking about the unfinished business and the more that needs to be done. Does that include, in your view, the need for more stimulus spending, particularly in America's cities? Or is the White House right in saying, let's just wait a few months, maybe into next year, and see how the first stimulus plan works out?
It must be more targeted stimulus. We've watered the roots, the leaves, we've not watered the roots. So even as we water the bank roots, they're too big to fail. The hemorrhaging is outrunning the stimulus. 500,000 plus jobs a month are lost, 4.4 million homes in foreclosure, $100 billion in student loan debt, 2.3 million Americans in prison, 1 million are black, and unemployment is at depression levels. And so there must be some right now investment and enforcement of civil rights law at the bottom. We need a stimulus package right now that's bottom up. A bank here got $2 billion it did not want and is sent back to Washington. If that $2 billion was, say, spent among 10 banks in the inner city, they could be a force in helping to modify home loans and reduce repossession and focus on restructuring. If that money was spent bottom up and not just top down, they could have more immediate benefits.
Let's do a little compare and contrast here. I want to go back again to your 1984 Democratic Convention speech. Hear one of the central messages of candidate Jesse Jackson.
I have a message for our youth. I challenge them to put hope in their brains and not dope in their veins. I told them that, like Jesus, I too was born in the slum, but just because you're born in the slum does not mean the slum is born in you. And you can rise above it if your mind is made up.
Let's fast forward 25 years now. That was the Reverend Jackson in 1984. Here is President Barack Obama this past week.
We've got to say to our children, yes, if you're African American, the odds of growing up amid crime and gangs are higher. Yes, if you live in a poor neighborhood, you will face challenges that somebody in a wealthy suburb does not have to face. But that's not a reason to get bad grades. That's not a reason to cut class. That's not a reason to give up on your education and drop out of school. No one has written your destiny for you. Your destiny is in your hands. You cannot forget that.
The question, I guess, is this: is imitation the best form of flattery, or is it that he says much the same thing, proof that so much was left undone?
Well, you need a combination of superior effort and equal opportunity. On the football, why do we do so well on football, basketball, baseball, golf, tennis, and track? Whenever the playing field is even, and the rules are public and the goals are clear and there's a fair referee, we do well. In these inner cities where we have where guns and drugs are targeted, the government must play a strong role to stop the flow of guns. We must revive the ban on assault weapons, for example. We must have a real commitment, it seems to me, to have high motivation. He mentioned, I thought very wisely, structural inequality. Well, let's make it less unequal and let's make it more equal. And I think that's where investment comes in, enforcement of civil rights law, as well as the motivation.
Let me ask you.
I think the motivation speech is always appropriate, but you can overcome these gaps without commitment to investment and enforcement of law.
Let me ask you lastly, sir. CNN is going to launch round 2 of our groundbreaking Black in America series this week, and Soledad O'Brien and our documentary team have done a remarkable job on this. I want to ask you a simple question. What is it like being black in America today as compared to when the Reverend Jesse Jackson first ran for president in 1984?
We faced a headwind in 1984 and maybe a tailwind in 2004 because America is changing as we're choosing those ball teams on uniform color, not on skin color. I mean, there's a sense of euphoria. There's a certain high. It's high noon in our politics, but on the other hand, it's midnight in our economy. We're still number one in infant mortality, number one in short life expectancy by 7 years, number one targeted in home foreclosures. Lawsuits have proven that blacks were targeted, steered, and clustered, less access to capital, industry, and technology. And so there is a structural gap that he addressed that must be meaningfully addressed by government policy as well as a will to fight back and to be self-motivated.
Reverend Jesse Jackson, thanks for coming in and giving us the last word today. It's good to see you, sir.
Thank you.